Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to a Wolfram language design review, part of our language completeness and consistency and completeness, I think, um, series. All right, multi-panel plots. Okay, we continue to have horrors
Oh,
here.
Oh, wow. I did not see that pinking at all. I don't know
me
why
neither.
that happened.
Well,
Um,
I'm running a version here.
Do you have any dynamics disabled?
No, I'm running the version from December 1st. Nothing is disabled there.
Okay.
okay. Well, maybe you could try reevaluating it. Maybe it got, yeah. So I'm not sure what happened there. We can take a look.
Okay, let me make a design principle comment.
hmm
Okay. The wonderful thing about symbolic languages is that you can just pick up things and do stuff with them rather than having to have back-flipped, say it up front type stuff, if that made any sense.
Elaborate.
Well, with plots, you got a plot. You want to combine some plots. Take the plot, combine it, rather than, oh, I'm going to make a plot. Let me think in advance. I'm going to write this thing. I'm going to have these weird options that panelize this plot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's much more natural for people, given and something now possible, given that we have a symbolic language, which we've had for 38 years now, that you can make the thing. I mean, we made the same mistake with this database stuff of making it sort of, inverted. That is, it's like, oh, you've got to say everything you want up front, rather than just make a thing, then do things to it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I mean, I think there's some room for both. And,
Yes,
and
there is,
and there's
but
some cases where it's easier one way or the other.
okay, so let me make several comments. First point is, going forward, we really should have enough tagging information in what we get back from a plot that we could reconstruct things, right? In the graphics right now, we're not storing what the original function was or any of that kind of stuff. And, I kind of think we should move towards a world in which we're doing that. I mean, it's kind of like in the graphics, in the world of, the model view controller thing, which was popular a decade ago or something now. It's kind of like, why don't we just have the data for the plot sitting right there in the symbolic representation for the plot, which we kind of do have, but it's been processed to the point where it's all, mangled up, so to speak,
Right.
right? It would
Um,
be much better if the data was just sitting there and if the plot was just because really the data is right there. It's not like we needed to mangle it, so to speak. Do you see what I'm saying?
What do you mean the
yes.
data
I mean,
is
so
right
so the
there?
question is, would the data for like plot be sign of X, or would it be the sampled bit of sign of X?
Okay, we need the sampled stuff, but we also need something that says it came from sign of X.
Right. Um, the
Well,
one concern, possibly off in a corner is, you're plotting an interpolating function that came out of ndsolve and it's huge, or
Right. That's off in the corner.
um,
Right. When the
and then
input data
and
is
then graphics
huge.
get the little data not stored footer.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. That'd be
Um,
fine. That would be just fine. I mean, most of the time it would be stored and everybody would be happy. But now, so my point is, when you have these graphics, making them multi-panel, doing this, doing that. I mean, just like to give you an example, graphics grid and graphics row and so on, which are
mhm.
still problematic, still have problems, which we
Yep.
need to iron out. Those are very useful functions. Like I just had to write something a couple of days ago where um, there was a version of rule plot, okay, where I had to write it by hand. I couldn't use graphics row because, well, actually, I did. No, that's right. I did use graphics row in the end, but I didn't use it all the way down because I needed, I didn't give me adequate control and it had bugs and so on, which I
Right.
don't like that it has bugs. But it's a pain to do these things with, oh, you position this way, you have a table of coordinates, blah, blah, blah. Much easier to just say, I've got a list of things, graphics row, stick them one after the other. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
the issue with plots, obviously, is you've got to get the axes to line up and this and that and the other. But I think we should be storing enough information that we can do that. And that fundamentally, it's kind of like, graphics grid, and maybe it is even a version of graphics grid that does these things where you're, combining axes, which is the main
Mm-hmm.
thing we're talking about in these gridded plots, right?
Right. Yes.
So I hope, maybe you can think a bit about the engineering of this, of what do we store in the graphics object to make it a nice modern graphics object where we could, in principle, get the data back out of it. Or we could get enough information to be able to do these things with combining plots and so on. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. And, it's right. I mean, traditionally plot has been, it's, it generates a graphic,
Right. Well,
but then you
originally
want, a part
right.
in the
Originally,
middle.
it printed out PostScript, right?
Yeah, as a side effect. So but
Yeah.
that's today we want something, and also we need to think about backward compatibility and so on, and forward compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully there's stuff that we can put into a graphics object that will not cause trouble if it's run in an earlier version, although that's not our most important problem.
I mean, that shouldn't be mostly an issue.
Okay, fine.
Um,
All right, so look, plan on something where we keep inside list plot a nicely encapsulated lump of the data,
mhm.
okay? And then think through how you take, you know, these plots. And why it has a second? Oh, I see, it's got a second thing there. I mean, why? Okay.
Right. That's to make it a row rather than a column is why
I
there's the
see.
list at.
Okay, fine.
Right, because it's plot grid.
All right,
You
so
specifically mentioned that we should look at plot grid and think about how, we
but
could.
this is nice. I mean, what happens here is very intuitive and very
Well,
nice.
wait. I'm pointing out an issue,
Hmm.
right?
Which it
With
has a
it,
solution for.
sure, but I'm just saying that, plot grid is not right. It's I
It's not a
think
panacea. It's not the full story.
right.
It's a simple hacky case, but it shows us what we can imagine doing.
Right. So, right. I mean, these two plots have different vertical scales, which you see if you
I
keep
see. I see.
axes, but if you switch to frames, then it only shows you one of the
Yeah,
two,
all
which
right.
is
So it's a bug, right?
right.
Well, I mean, it's,
It's a
perhaps not
bug.
the default choice, right? If you do add as an option to plot grid, plot range goes to, well, let's just say max comma max.
Okay, but Brett, what this should do in this particular case is probably by default to flip the axis for the second plot to the right-hand side. Okay? But I mean, and if there were three of them, then you're toast. And it probably
Right.
prints a message, I think. Prints a message, does what you told it to do, but prints a message. See what I'm saying?
I mean, there are lots of possibilities. I'm not sure that that's necessarily what you want as the default.
Okay, fine.
Right.
But my
You
point
could
is,
rescale the plot ranges, right? So
oh
that
yeah,
thing,
that's a good point.
right.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Right.
That's a
Which, if
good
you
At
point.
say
least
plot range
within
goes to
at least
max
within
max,
certain,
that's what this
which
one
is the right thing to
does.
do for certain
All right,
ranges.
I want to see how you would make this picture with your back flippery. By back flippery, I mean this weird multi-panel stuff, which I don't understand at all. Do you realize I have never used that, Brett? I
Okay, so
tried a
do
couple of times.
plot.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to test your documentation here. Why is it hanging up here? Huh. This has become slower. This rag has become slower. What is happening?
I don't know that there's anybody in this meeting who can opine on that.
Well, anyway. Okay, how would I do it? Tell me how to do it.
Plot of x squared.
Whatever, go on. Plot of x, comma x squared, yep.
And let's change x from 0 to 2, just to make it interesting.
Okay.
Plot layout goes to row.
That's crazy. That's just outright crazy. It's just the wrong way to do it. You should never have done this. You introduced this way too late in a cycle. This was just a really bad idea.
Why?
Because it's backflipping. It's not the place where you think about it. This isn't a place where you make a layout. This is a plot. It's making a single plot.
Okay, I feel like you have a hung kernel. Right, you haven't even gotten an in, right? So
This is just really a bad design. Sorry. I mean, if it had been a wrapper around the plot head, that might have been possible. Okay, what the hell is that? Why does it have, well, whatever. I don't know. All
It
right.
just has a little bit of space between them. The
Yeah, I
axes are still
understand.
shared.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is just the wrong way to do this. I'm sorry. It's just the wrong way to do it. You should generate
Okay.
two plots and make it just the wrong thing. It's just the wrong frigging thing. Oh my God. No. It's just the wrong thing. And some random option we have, why is that stacked? That's not stacked, that's overlaid.
What
Stacked
is
will be
going
one added to the
on?
other.
Yeah, I know it's
That's wrong. It means you've never even tried it.
that is weird.
Die.
so sorry, could it be that those only apply to things like, pie chart and bar chart?
No.
Okay.
Let's see how many more I can try. Okay. This is the wrong way to do it. Okay, so let's talk about the right way to do it. I mean, again, I think plot grid is not the worst name for a thing that combines plot-like things, if you understand what I'm saying. Or it's some kind of, well, what are the options? The options are the things that actually combine plots. Is that correct? Combine inside the plot.
Right.
I mean, show is doing that. Show is doing the overlay case.
Yes.
Okay, but things that take data and stack one on top of the other, we have stacked list plot and so on. as a separate function,
Correct.
which I think is a good idea. But, and I don't know how much other things are worth thinking about stacking.
I mean, we have stacked list plot and stacked date list plot. And then things like bar chart, it's a layout
Got,
option again.
which is really bad. It's really bad. Again, I found that almost unusable. I have used that one, but it's really hard to use.
It would be easy to add, stacked bar chart.
Well, that's not what we want. What we want is a way of taking existing things. Well, I don't know whether stacking is something where you should be able to take existing things and stack them. I think probably not. You see what I'm saying? I don't think that's the same thing as taking these plots and sticking them next to each other. See what I'm saying? Messing with the curves inside a plot. Well, I mean, we do that with show, but I think that the idea of stacking them, for example, is really a different concept. Am I making sense?
It's structural, not positional or something. It's an extra level of difference.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
and like, for example, stacking is entirely, if the plots are log plots.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
I mean, it has to be done with care, which if we have the original, thing, then it can be.
Right. But let's solve the problem. Let's solve the one basic problem we have, which is combining plots to share their axes. Okay? That's one problem to solve. To me, that's the most obvious. I mean, of these things which I'm calling the backflip design things. Okay? Can you describe what else is backflipped like that?
What else is backflipped like that?
I mean, plot layout seems to be the worst offender.
Right. Plot layout, the multi-axis arrangement thing.
What's the multi-axis arrangement thing?
It's an option to like list plot to have multiple data with one axis on the left-hand side and one axis on the right-hand side.
Okay, how do we do it for this case? How do I put multiple axes on?
For just a second. For plot, you don't. Right now, it's just basically list plot, list line plot.
How come?
Time, demand,
Oh,
which, I mean, there is some demand for it, but, and
Oh.
it's,
let's see the design for the list plot. How do I do it? Can you tell me?
you have multiple data sets and you say multi-axis arrangement goes to true.
It has an example, so.
I think that is an okay option. I don't feel that that's not the same character. It's like a plot range or like a frame label or something like that. That is a perfectly reasonable option to have. Makes sense? Now, I think it is important that it exists for all functions, and I'm surprised that it isn't in the code a straightforward thing to get it for all functions. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, once you have a free floating axis like this, I don't see what's the difference between this and plot layout. I mean, at the end of the day, I presume you have some fancy graphics, or is that a is that not actually have head graphics.
That is head graphics.
Yeah.
So Itai, the main thing that I'm saying is from a user point of view, this is like, like I could say, frame label arrow hello. I really like that autocomplete. Isn't that a nice autocomplete?
It's lovely.
I mean, finally I know where to put what do I put where?
Where it puts it on these, I have no idea.
Well, it failed.
Apparently the answer is nowhere.
Okay, so that's a bug. And what happens if I say frame to true here?
I mean, that is true. I mean, it switched.
That was a bug. We should fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. But my point is, I consider this multi-axis arrangement thing, along with ticks, along with other stuff like that, that's a perfectly valid option. I perfectly well understand how to use it. Make sense? That's very different from picking up two different plots and sticking them in a certain place on the page. Am I making sense?
I think so. Although, I mean, presumably there's still a use case for having two separate plots and wanting to do this type of arrangement with them.
Sure, but that's right. But I mean, so my point is the outer, whatever the outer wrapper is, the graphics grid, plot grid, whatever outer wrapper, needs to have the possibility of a multi-axis arrangement option. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the only thing that's really wrong here, as far as I'm concerned, is the backflip design of a plot layout inside a single plot. I just don't think that's how people think about it. I'm going to make 3 plots and they're going to be laid out in this way. Make the 3 plots, lay them out. It's not the case that from within the plot, you say, oh, am I going to do a row or column today? People are used to the idea that's a separate function. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we should make happen. Right. So let's plan. I mean, initially, why don't we call it plot row, plot column, plot grid for now?
Okay.
I have a feeling that's not going to end up surviving. I have a feeling these are going to wind up wanting to be options to graphics column, graphics row, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the way people will think about it. It's like, I've got a bunch of pictures. Okay, I want to make a graphics grid out of them. They understand how to do that now. They're going to say, well, actually, I want to move these closer together. It's something to do with the spacings mechanism, which, by the way, it drives me crazy that row and graphics row have different sort of ways of getting spacings to happen. And I do think that the spacings option should probably be supported in row.
No.
Explain.
We tried to stop you 15 years ago, and we were unable to do so.
Stop me doing what?
Row does not generate rows. Row generates sequences of text. The row is the new name for sequence form.
Well, I use row all the time, partly because graphics row is so buggy. I mean, row just takes things.
Row is not the opposite of column.
I understand that point.
They have no relationship at all to one another.
I like row very much, and I like the fact that it line wraps, and it's a happy thing.
Right.
Okay? The only issue with row is the spacing thing. That it's sort of annoying to use spacer 10 or whatever in row, when in graphics row, you use spacings, arrow, whatever. What is the second argument to graphics row anyway?
Does it have a second argument?
I think it's documented too, but I don't think it does anything.
Oh, look at that. Well, if you didn't have a bug, I wouldn't be complaining about anything. My God, that's the exact same thing as with row, right? So if I say row,
well actually, no, row.
No,
it's the second argument to the row is a separator.
Yeah, I know. Right, but so here, Are you saying this doesn't do anything? The second argument to graphics row?
I don't think it does.
And then we've got this, which somebody misdocumented to say horizontal and vertical spacings because this is a row. Could you please fix that? It's a bug.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think this has an easy solution, which is to just make this work the same way that graphics row works and take a second argument, which is the spacer. I'm making sense. Especially since, I mean, it's bizarre. It has a second argument and it has a spacings option.
Yeah, there's a few things that are like that.
Well, we should leave
Was
it.
it
It's
pane
fine.
that takes
Okay, listen,
size as
listen.
the second
Let me tell you
argument
what
and
to
image
do.
size?
Okay, leave the spacings option. Make the second argument be the spacer, just like it is in row.
So it's the spacer, not the amount of space.
That's correct, because apparently you didn't even implement the amount of space, right? If I say table,
Okay,
it
and
is
if
the
you
amount of
change that
space.
30 to 100 or something, will we see a difference? Yeah, so it's implemented.
Yeah, I thought it wasn't, but I guess it got hooked up at some point.
And in the case of row,
It's going to put hundreds between things.
yeah. Why did we put an option spacings as well as,
Because it inherited from, right? Because it's the one row form of graphics grid, and graphics grid takes spacings, just like grid does.
I see.
I'm not saying this was the correct decision, but and I wasn't there, but I'm guessing that that was the logic.
I was going to say I wasn't there either, but
I don't know if there's any way to change this without, I mean, what do we have here? We have a number basically. So if we change this to work like row, there will be a corner case, and we left this functionality, right? For compatibility. There will be a corner case in which you could not insert a number in between your pictures.
Right.
Right,
You'd
but
have
if you
to
put
like
creep
make it a
smiley
number
or
that's
something,
a string of the number or something, right?
Yes. So I
or
mean, I don't
hold
think that's,
form or whatever.
yeah. I don't think that's heinous. I think we could get away with doing the same thing as we do with row.
Yeah, I I wouldn't be thrilled about it, but I'm not gonna throw up my arms in desperation against that.
All right, that's what I think we should do then.
Okay, so the second argument becomes more
Just like
general.
for row. Yeah,
Okay.
just like for row. Okay, let's move on with our next topic. I mean, so I think
Yep.
that the plan here is let's figure out how to make, you know, a plot grid like thing really work. Okay. This was a bad idea. I'm sorry, but this was just a bad idea.
I mean, the usefulness for that one is, I mean, so like Roger was looking at these things yesterday, and his use case is he has a function that's going into plot that is vector valued.
Okay.
You know, so in that case, it is like jumping through hoops to get it into individual plots.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I don't object to having this option. I just think
Yeah,
the
no,
other
I
thing
mean, I'm
should exist.
totally on board with having, you know, an outside-in approach as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I should say instead of inside out rather than backflipped. Yes, inside out. Okay, let's move on to our chestnut of the day. Chestnut du jour. Ready for the chestnut? Okay.
Sure.
What's that?
Said sure.
The issue is, do we have Jason Harris here?
We do not.
No.
Wouldn't he be relevant for this? Given
This
that-
is, well,
I mean,
yeah.
it depends on what direction we decide to go with
All right,
this.
so I've got a general comment to make here. What is that? I didn't know there was a thing called parameter variables in traditional form. Oh,
Yeah, I'm not sure it's documented, but
okay. So here's the thing. There are many options about formatting that, when we introduced this stuff in version 3, back before some fraction of our employees were born, we knew we were making a bunch of choices. And we decided we should just make the defaults as good as possible, which we did. But I think now I'm so frustrated. I mean, like for example, my favorite annoyance is this. Okay, drives me crazy. Okay, so now I think in traditional form, it does that, which is good enough. Okay. But how about that in standard form? I can't get that. What I think we should do is to have a bunch of tweaking options that work both in standard form and in traditional form that give us well, let's take a look here, what you're saying. Yeah, well, for sure, if we didn't document it, nobody's going to know about it. Okay.
well, okay, so that's one option. Everything else is documented. Well, maybe not the system options, but
I've never heard of the system options for this. I don't see any options at all here. What are the system options associated with this stuff?
well, it's that they're the system options are pretty limited. They like disabled new root formatting and
Okay. So they're escape valves. They're not.
yes, right. So I mean, but the the fact that you can customize template boxes, is documented, and we regularly have talks about it in the tech conference.
Sorry,
Believe
you can
fraction
customize what?
box
Sorry,
options
I
documented.
lost the fact you can customize what?
Template boxes. Right. So if, for example, uh, if you have an unevaluated limit, right, and that'll format using a template box, and then you can customize the appearance of that template box because you want a down arrow rather than right
you
arrow
customize
0
that?
minus or sorry 0 plus
How do you customize that?
by creating a style in the style sheet.
Oh, okay, that's horrifying.
And you have to have some knowledge of the box language.
Okay, we lost the game there. Okay, so I mean that's serious, non-end user activity, which is fine.
But it should be said, in terms of the knowledge of the box language, a more than you would think of it is actually documented. It's arcanum, but it's not.
Yeah, I understand.
It's
that's
not.
good.
It's
But
not
that means
Gnostic secrets.
fair enough. Then I mean, okay. What we need to do then the problem we have is largely a design problem, not an implementation problem, is what you're telling me. The hooks exist, we just haven't hooked them up. Fair?
Well, I mean, it depends on what it is you're doing. I mean, there are typesetting problems that are, where it's just okay, we're going to redo this template box because we don't like how a particular structure comes out, but that's not going to help for other kinds of typesetting problems.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But let's review what we might imagine. Okay, so some things have changed since this original design was done. For example, we now have associations. where we can have, boatloads of named options, basically. And, I am wondering, I mean, just like we have single letter italics and a few other things like that. See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
When you need that option, you need that option. You just switch it. If we could simply, for example, we could say, we could call this, polynomial ordering arrow, I don't know, systematic, or, textbook, or something else, whatever it is, right? And that would then switch between these forms and so on. My first question is what, can we get an inventory of the things that we think are problematic? Let me give you another example. Okay. Okay, so I mean that one isn't particularly controversial. More controversial is probably the 1 over sign. That's a simplification.
Right.
Um,
I mean, if you did hold of that, right, you'd get 1 over sign.
right.
Um,
Okay, but so which other things are there where there's sort of serious choice about how to format it? I mean, another thing is, okay, let's make a list of potential issues. We have polynomial order. We have parens, only when necessary, or to add clarity.
Yeah, well, some people have different definitions of when necessary.
Well, no, when necessary means that if you didn't have that paren, the thing would mean something different.
Yeah, and there, well, I mean, maybe you would say those some people are just plain wrong, but
Well, I don't understand. If I say f/at g/at
Well,
f,
for example, I was looking through a list that Michael Trott had sent some years ago, and I was amused to discover that one of the things that he was hoping for was to strip parentheses in certain cases around pure functions, which I was utterly amused by, given the many discussions we've had that sort of run in the opposite direction.
right, but see, this is an example, okay? I can never remember. Every damn time I have to, and this is many times a day even, so I really should know it by now. You know, or maybe it's because for some reason it didn't do what I thought it did certain times, blah blah blah. But in any case, that that precedence, well, that associativity is, you know, is something where I can imagine it being useful to put some parens in there for clarity. Let's keep going with other things that are, other examples of things where it can go either way. Oh, I got another one. Built up fractions versus inline. Okay. What are some other ones?
Radicals versus exponents.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good example.
How to designate multiplication.
Oops. Oh. Oh, here's another one, obvious one. How to indicate a pure function. Wow, that doesn't look at your eyes.
Well, because you're not in an input cell.
I know. That's a good one. Oh yeah, there's another one. Whether to, oh my God. Whether to use whether to shorten /at, etc., etc., etc. In other words, does it map? You know, if I say this, oh, you know, it gives the short form there. Not obvious it should. All right, so my claim is that most of these things, you know, if we were to have a giant association that just has a bunch of settings for these things, that's pretty much as good as we're going to be able to do.
Okay, well, I disagree with including polynomial order in this list because that's actually changing the underlying expression, whereas
But traditional form doesn't.
yeah, and traditional form isn't guaranteed, right? The traditional form has a big note on it saying that it may not be equivalent to, you know, what you typed in.
Right, but 1 over x is, you know, x to the minus 1, yes, it's displayed as 1 over x, even in standard form. Right?
Sure, but that's, I mean, okay, so yes, there are various edge cases, but that doesn't change the fact that
I take your point, though. I take your point that it is nice to be able to see it. However, it is super, super frustrating that x squared minus 1 displays as minus 1 minus plus x squared. I'm not saying, you know, in other words, it's one of these things where you can shoot yourself in the foot if you do the wrong thing. Just like you can set 2 plus 2 equals 5 in principle. But I think it's an option we should provide, both for traditional form and for standard form. Even though, yes, if you set that option, you will no longer be able to count part numbers and see that stuff and so on. Oh, here's another one. Whether to display lists of lists as matrices, as grids, basically. I mean, again, most of the time you don't want that, but I can completely imagine saying standard form of blah, you know, and then that. I mean, because these things are a super big pain. Like let's say, you know, displaying a built-up fraction not as a built-up fraction. The only way to do it is to say row of the thing, comma, blah, 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 which is really bad. I mean, it's you know, it's not making use of a bunch of our auto spacing stuff and so on. Am I making sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, depending on how much we're concerned about the fraction problem, you know, the front end is totally conceivable that the front end could, on its own, without assistance from the kernel, solve the fraction problem.
Remember, solve it. I mean, you don't know what you want.
Well, the point being is that it could provide options to allow you to do what you want.
I don't think these things should be front-end options. I really, really don't think so. I think they're kernel options. I think these are for programmatic use. I think the idea that somebody's going to set it in a
and I'm not, and you know, for most of these other things, they can't be front-end options anyway. But I'm just making sure that you're aware that's a thing that could be done, and in fact, it is even done already today if, you know, your fraction has to be line broken.
Okay, I got another one of these. Numerical precision. Number of digits.
And that is a thing that the front end does already.
I know that. But I find that, you know, somewhat, I mean, number form I use, decimal form now I'm using a bit. Okay, so I mean, one question is this in a style wrapper, which would be front-endian, or is this in something else, which could be kernelian? Is that a way to see the distinction, John?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
any way to put in a style wrapper and have it not be front-endial?
I mean, as a technical matter, yes, but it would be a profoundly bad idea. It's
Okay.
style, style really means front end, and we should preserve that.
Okay. But so most likely these are options to standard form or traditional form. Do you agree?
I
Well,
don't know.
well, it depends. Do you want it to be, a one-off, or do you want it to be, for every output? Because
I don't want it to be for every output.
I
don't care
mean,
about that.
consider, for example, number form isn't an option to standard form or traditional form. It's its own thing.
Yeah.
Because because
useful.
you can, yeah, you might want to individually tweak things throughout your expression.
Yeah. And hopefully standard form can have a standard form inside it. It can, I think.
Yes,
I mean,
it should be able to.
I think the use case here is I'm trying to make some nice looking output that is programmatically generated. This is not for interactive use. I'm trying to make something for output, for presentational output. Help me do it type thing.
okay, right. So if you're talking about a dedicated wrapper, then yes, I have no problem with any of these going into a dedicated wrapper of, customized standard form or whatever it is.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a stupid name, but
no, I get the point.
I am a little concerned that, we go in with the expectation that, well, nobody would ever care about want to evaluate this and have it mean something, have it preserve evaluation semantics. I'm a little concerned that that's an assumption that may be quickly forgotten.
Maybe. I mean, people typing percent and so on and having this thing be inside, because that's an issue. I mean, in other words, if I say something like,
well, if we create it as a new wrapper, right, we could strip it from percent, right? I mean, there
well,
is a polynomial form which is not documented and has issues, right? But
I didn't even know it was not documented. Okay, so here, but if I do this and I say percent, well, if I say percent, it's just going to do the x squared minus 1. But
yep.
if I now say traditional form onto that, oh God, that's
Right.
so
So now
weird.
that's
so weird because it didn't have the style of traditional form. And so it's getting these code font. But
right.
now if I do percent, it'll just be sitting there with the traditional form inside it.
Exactly. Just the problem of all forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not, you can think of it as a problem or not a problem, depending on.
Well, so
it's documented as a possible issue. Ian and I spent a great deal of time updating all the 20-something forms to properly clarify this issue because there were so many reports from confused external people.
well,
Yeah,
and maybe I should reduce my level of concern because this, in fact, is a historical concern that's been there since, before I started the company. Number form, matrix form, table form,
Yep.
Yes.
engineering form, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but traditional form is post John.
Yeah.
The the yeah, well, okay. So I mean, I think
Okay, yeah. I mean, some of these are quite difficult to implement, right? So don't expect them to just happen, right?
Yeah,
like
I
the
understand.
parentheses one is you I cannot begin to describe how incredibly hard that would be to implement.
Which one?
The parentheses.
Yeah. Are you sure?
But
I thought there was a thing called parenthesis form that maybe isn't well documented.
Yes, there is precedence form. So it depends on, so if you want to add or possibly remove, certainly if you want to add specific parentheses, you can do that. But sort of an automatic setting like, only necessary, um, or versus, helpful hint, that code is so right, the parenthesization code is so distributed because it has to
Yeah, I
worry
get it.
about operators and
Yeah, I get
random
it. I get it.
objects and whatnot. It's trust me, it's hard to make some sort of automatic behavior.
Right. My guess is this should be an association, which is an optional second argument to standard form and traditional form. That's what I think. It's a second argument that has a boatload of options where, you'll never be able to use it without asking an LLM or looking it up. Except that you'll remember that, oh, I needed this table. I mean, I can look in things I've written because I know I've had hackeration had to be done. I mean, a fairly, just to be clear, okay, so this is a fairly common thing. Okay, so that looks perfectly decent. And yeah, that's a perfectly decent way to do it. Now, a slightly trickier case is what I would write as approximately, oops. How do I write that? And because tilde, won't do anything, right? How do I write such a thing? Because I've needed that quite often.
I would write it with row using raw boxes on the first argument.
He says, making a frog noise. I mean, that's hardly a beautiful solution. That's actually not a bad solution. I never thought of doing that. But I mean, there are a certain number of these essentially pure. Actually, I'm curious what happens if I do. Anybody know how to do this in tech?
It's slash approx.
Huh. I wonder what that is.
Well,
I
nothing. Right. It's something that displays correctly, but it can't be evaluated because, tilde is defined as a binary operator. Now, could we make it a prefix or binary operator?
But what even is this thing? What is this? What is it? I mean, I can guess I can.
Well, you can just show cell expression, but it's
a row box.
Yeah, right. So it's as if you typed in the tilde character followed by 6.7, which would display the same way, right? You could in an input cell type in the tilde character and 6.7, but then you couldn't evaluate that because tilde is defined as a binary operator.
Hey, you could if you don't like that space to the left of the tilde, you could get hacky and put a negative space in the string.
Yes, I know. Yeah, it's not a totally terrible. What happens if I do this? Control.
Does the insert menu still have the shift commands?
Shift what?
What was it? Or was it adjust?
Sorry. Yeah, what did we call it? I'm pretty sure it
Nudge
does.
left, nudge right.
Nudge
Yes.
is what we called it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, they're still there.
Yep. That's how I figured out it was nudge.
Okay.
This works. Okay, that's interesting. I mean,
Right, because that's just a string which contains linear syntax.
yeah, right.
Typeset linear syntax.
It's probably horrifying if I actually look at that in input form.
Right. If you did the input form, you would not be very happy with what you saw. But oh wow, and
Are you allowed to
it
do
still
that without
remembers
getting
that it
waivers
came
from
from
everybody?
a tech assistant. So so it's even more horrifying than you might have thought otherwise.
Right. But the main point here is, okay, all right, well, it's good that we have that escape valve. It's sort of a pity that one has to use the tech input mechanism. But
Well,
okay.
I mean, you don't have to. I mean, you could do escape tilde tilde escape, I believe, is the input alias for the tilde.
Yeah,
tilde.
right. But in a string, you can do that.
Right.
Okay, I should run off here, but
Okay. Yeah, no, I think no, this you know, like I said, some of these are easy, some of these are quite challenging, and so, you know, don't expect all of these to be implemented for 14.3.
yeah, right. But let's start off. Let's start doing it, and maybe we can add, for the flakier ones, we can add WFR type capability to experiment with it.
Okay.
Let's see what we can do. All right, good stuff. Okay, now we're going to solve the subscripted variables problem, and then we'll really be catching up with things that we wanted to do at the beginning of the 90s.
Yeah, that would. I think when you asked if Jason was here at the beginning, I think the little bit of confusion there was, I realized later, is that I think you were thinking a little bit about that meeting, which Jason will definitely be a part of.
Yeah, okay. I think we're going to solve that now. I think with auto completion and matrix symbol conventions and so on, I think we're going to be able to solve it finally, which is going to be exciting and make a bunch of our users very happy.
No, I haven't talked to Itai about your desire to do this yet, so that's a conversation we'll be having later.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to summarize for Itai for 1 second so that his steam pressure can develop and then abate. Okay. Okay. The issue is the symbol E. People want to use it for energy.
Yeah, we already, as I said in my email reply to you, or did I not actually reply to you? Oh, I know I didn't reply to you because I wanted because I didn't remember how we decided to track this, but we discussed this in July, and but I don't remember if we decided to discuss it in LCC or take it to user assistance. And
I think
that was the meeting I was there for half of from a hotel room with a bad internet connection.
Okay, well, I think we should have a custom meeting about that specific topic. Okay. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Okay. Bye.